Hello everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to install KaliLinux or any other Linux of your choice on a Linux container known as the LXC on a Type 1 hypervisor known as Proxmox. Without any further delays, let's get started. Alright, so what will we learn today, right? So we're going to be basically installing KaliLinux on a Linux container. I mean, technically it doesn't have to be Kali. It could be any Linux distro, as I'm going to show you in just a little bit. Basically, we're going to install a base bare bone image of KaliLinux and work our way up and install all the tools, just like how it comes with a default Kali installation. Right? But this time, it's not going to be a virtual machine. It's going to be actually run on a container, a Linux container, aka LXC. Also, we're going to be configuring a remote desktop protocol, the RDP. There's a package called xrdp in Debian. Well, that's something that we'll install. Also VNC, right? The tight VNC server that comes with the Kali packages. And we're going to test the RDP and VNC sessions to see performance and see how it goes. Okay, so let's get started. So basically, I'm going to start off with just show you what I have done here. The Proxmox installation I have a single node and I have one Kali machine, which is a virtual machine, installed and running. As you can see, it's consuming about 1.242 GB of memory, and it's a default installation. You can see all the tools. So yeah, nothing fancy there. One thing that I want you to see is once you click on local storage nodes, you can store images, the ISO images, or CT templates. These CT templates are basically the container templates, right? So out of the box, now if you click on templates, there are a bunch of other templates, right, from different distros. Apparently, you know, Ubuntu, Fedora, Gentoo, or whatever. For Kali, there are none, right? There is nothing there, right? So I've been searching for a template for Kali. I couldn't find one. I went to Kali documentation, right? Kali documentation has a section called containers, Dockers, and LXD specifically, right? So LXDs are a little bit variation of LXC, where the Linux containers are run on top of Ubuntu, right? If you click on it, it says KaliLinux LXC and LXD images. If you click on this, this section tells you how to install LXD, right? It's basically Linux container on top of Ubuntu. So you install the Ubuntu basic first, and then you install the LXD packages, and then you're going to run your containers on top of Ubuntu. But that's not something that we want to do here in this case. We don't want an operating system, underneath, and we run containers on top. We want to run KaliLinux straight out of a Type 1 hypervisor like Proxmox or Hyper-V or a VMware, vSphere, or Zen, right? Because we want to minimize the load on our main host machine, right, where you have the nodes installed, right? So, I mean, we could do that, but I wanted to get the images. So here it says that the images are available on this page. So if you click on this page, right, you'll see it's saying that these are the listings, and if you search for Kali, you'll find there's this version right here, the default AMD 64, but there's no link, right? There's no way to click on it and download. And apparently, if you click on this link right here and say download from URL, and you paste it here and say query, nothing pops up. You need an exact file name, right, in order to download the template. So it turns out, after some digging, if you add images to the URL, images / and type enter, it will take you to this directory of images, right? I don't know why it is hidden. I don't know why there's no proper link for this. But yeah, it is what it is, right? So if you click on Kali directory, you go to current you go to AMD 64, you go to default, and then you pick the most recent folder. In this case, it's 21st of June 2022, and then you'll see all these files, right? You'll see these files like for LXC. We're not going to be using this because it's not something that we have to use this, right? So what we need to do in order to install a container in Proxmox, we need the rootfs file system, right? This is the file that we need, right? The rootfs. So technically, you can take any distro, right? You can go back and say, okay, I want to install Arch Linux, although Arch is already part of their default repo. But let's say if it wasn't, right? You go to default, you click on it, and then you can pick up this file right here, and it's the same process, right? So rootfs file, which is about 148 in this MB in this case, but we're not going to do that, right? So we're focusing on Kali. We'll go to Kali, and then we will download this rootfs, right? 73 megabytes. Once you copy this URL, right? You copy it, then you go back to Proxmox, download from URL page, and you paste it here, and you say query URL, and look what happens. You say it found the file, right? So this is the file name, and says you want to download this file. It's 72.76 MB, right? That's exactly what it is, right? And we're like, yes. So I'm not going to download this. I've already downloaded this file right here, right? 76.26 megabytes. So we're going to use this basic root file system to create our template, right? This is how we're going to do it. So you create a template. You click on this on the top right corner. Let's give it a container ID of 31337. Don't laugh. And then we're going to give it a password. Next. Now, this is where you're going to select the template, right? Technically, it's not really a template. We're going to build the template in the process. This is a file system, the basic file system. So next, we're going to give it a storage of 20 GB. Next, we're going to give it a core, 6 cores. We're going to try to match it with the virtual machine that is already running, so that at least we have a proper baseline for both of them in order for us to compare them. I'm going to give it a 8 GB memory and about 4 GB of swap space. Then let's go to network. Okay, so network. Please do not change the IPv6. If you do DHCP, your network is gonna start flopping. Don't touch the IPv6 settings. For IPv4 addresses, I am on 192.168.70 network, and I will give the system 201, and then it's a /24 subnet. My gateway router is sitting at 254. This is not necessary unless you have other systems on the network and you want this container to have access to the internet. It has to have a gateway so that it can get out of your network and go to the internet. But if you're just going to be testing this locally, this is not required, right? But I'm going to do it because I need to do some testing. Next, DNS, you don't have to do this. It will take it from the host being my node 2, which is my hypervisor. Let's move on next. And I want to start the container as soon as you finish. Don't save. And it's almost done. There you go. Task okay. All right. So while it's booting up, I'm going to click on it and go to the summary. As you can see, right, it's funny. I mean, once we finish the installation and we'll start comparing the memory, it will blow your mind, right? It literally blew my mind when I was comparing the virtual machine with a container, right? So I'm going to go to the console because it's bare minimum. There's nothing there except for a base kernel. That's why it's showing 11 megabytes, right? Once you start installing packages and GUI components like desktop environment and all that stuff, this number is definitely going to go up. But let's look at the console, right? So I'm going to go to the console, type in root, the password that you have set up while you were creating that container, and we're in. All right. So at this particular point, right, so it's absolutely, there's nothing in there, right? There's nothing in there. What I mean by that is literally nothing, right? So for example, if I want to use a ping command, there's no ping command, right? It's a basic kernel. But the good thing about this is this is a Linux kernel. This is a Kali Linux kernel, right? So we're using a kernel that is not out of Kali's or offensive security way. We're going to use their base kernel to build it up, right? So we're going to have less bugs and stuff. Hopefully no bugs, right? So the very first thing that we need to do is install some tools that will help us with networking, right? And there are a couple packages, like let's start with, I don't need sudo right now, so I'm going to do install, apt install, let's do for wget, let's do some man pages, I want to do a Vim editor and a nano, INET tools, I think there's called INET utilities, and then tools, and then you also have IP utilities, and then I need a ping, right? Yes. So now we should have base pinging capability. So let me check if I can reach my gateway. Yeah, sure I can. Everything's okay. My Ethernet 0 interface and the state is up, and we're good to go. So network is there. I should be even able to ping Google from my machine because I do have a gateway. Perfect. Okay, so at this point, networking is okay. Before we go any further, I want you to understand a couple of things, right? So in Kali Linux, I don't know if you have used it or not, but if you have, the newer version use ZSH for their terminal. It's very pretty. It's nice. It has amazing features and all of that stuff, which is great, right? The only issue is when you're doing a bare bone installation and you're adding things on top as you move on, especially with ZSH, the shells, is if you have multiple users down the line and you install the ZSH or any other shell, you would have to install it for every other user, right? So in this case, I think it would be wise to install the ZSH right from the beginning, so any user, right, apart from root, because we're not going to be working in root. You don't want to work in root all the time, right? So we need to create the user ASAP, but I don't want to create a user that won't have a ZSH, right? So I'm going to install ZSH, and then we're going to be quitting from root, and we're not going to be coming back to the root user again, and we're going to use that basic user to perform other operations. Okay, so in order to do that, so let's use some of the packages. So apt install, let's start with Kali default first. So there's some basic packages for Kali that are for defaults and for ZSH as well. We'll do a ZSH, then we have to use ZSH syntax highlighting. And then we also have ZSH auto suggestions, right? So once you install this, and this is good, I want to log out from root, and I want to log back in as root, just to check if we have ZSH. Okay, perfect. So now you can see we're in a ZSH terminal. Notice from the developer, the message from the developers, right? So this is the minimal installation of Kali Linux. You're likely to want to install supplemental tools, right? And this is exactly what we're going to do, right? So if you click on this URL and you say copy, and you want to see it, what do they mean? They're saying you need to install meta packages, right? And that's exactly what we're going to do. If you click on meta packages, you'll see these things, right? What type of desktop environment you can install. This is the default one that they use. The core image, the key tools, and this is the environment that you want to do, all of that stuff. So I'll show you this in the terminal, right? So, but for now, let's go back. So I'm not going to be working from root, so let's exit it out. Before I do that, we need to create a user. Right? So Kali comes with Kali user, so we're gonna exactly do that. So let's create a user named Kali. So we're gonna do Kali. Say okay, give it a password. We're also gonna give it a Kali password, just like default, right? And yes, so perfect. So now we have a Kali directory, right? So I want to show you something very interesting, right? So if I want to see, so for me, I have hidden directory and files, right? So I have the RC, right? ZSH RC, which has the configuration of all my ZSH, parameters. Now, because we have installed the ZSH first, prior to installing the user, this file should be there within Kali, right? So we're going to check this just in a bit. So let me actually switch user, and then we'll go to Kali. And you can see I'm in Kali right now, right? So let's do ls-a. Technically, I cannot. So sudo, and then Kali is not a sudo. There's another thing, right? So you need to get out, and let's make this guy have a sudo privilege, part of the sudo group, right? The way we're going to do this is user mod -ag, add this to sudo group, and which is the username. It's Kali. Now, let's log out. Actually, we don't want to be here anymore. Now we're going to log back in as Kali user. Now we're back as Kali user. Okay. Now we do ls-a, and you can see ZSH, and also you can see the pretty ZSH shell. Now, so let's look at our ID. What part of groups we are? We're definitely sudo, which is great. We can run root commands. Now, let's enable SSH, because I don't want to work from here. I mean, we can work from here. It's not an issue, but I would rather test this on a terminal. And it's good that you know how to enable SSH, right? So we'll do sudo first, because now we're a user. So sudo systemctl. We need to enable the service, if I can type correctly, and then we also need to start the service. Let's come back to it. It's not an issue. Let's do a base installation, right? Base installation of a remote desktop, like a desktop environment where there are no tools, right? So we will come back and install the tools later on when we install a default image, right? This image right here. But before we do that, we need to install Kali desktop, and I'm going to use this. This is the default one that Kali distro uses. You can use other ones like Made or LXDE or KDE or GNOME or i3. i3 is a tiling window manager. It has a steep learning curve, but it's an amazing. I use that on Arch Linux. So we're going to do this, right? So let's go back here and do that. So first of all, let's do update, and let's make sure our repositories are all updated and upgraded. And also my distro is upgraded. Yes, please. Perfect. So now let's install the desktop environment. So sudo apt install -y. Let's do Kali desktop XFCE. Let's do RX window. Let's do RDP, and I need a Firefox to test, to do the performance test, right? All right. I think it's going to take a little while, so I'm going to pause the video right here and come back when it's done. Okay, it's almost done, but I wanted to talk about is once you install these packages, there's one caveat. Do not restart the system, this guest, because there's for the network there's a conflict, right? Let me show you what I mean. So if you look at the logs, right, and you grab the Ethernet interface. Oh, sorry. You'll see a couple of things there, right? The Debian systems come with systemd networkd by default, right? Because that's the base init system that it uses, and networkd comes with it, right? So you have the systemd networkd that is responsible to bring up your network interface and for any network communication. But on top of it, once you install the packages from Kali distribution, it installs Network Manager, right? Now, what I've seen in a Linux container environment is if you keep both of them and you restart your host or the container, your network interface is going to go down, and it's very difficult to troubleshoot. Okay, you have to do it for every single time. You have to restart, and it's a mess, right? So the root cause is that you have to get rid of either one of them. Because networkd is part of systemd, which is part of the init system, it's very difficult to get rid of it, right? I mean, you can disable it. There's a long process of doing it. You can, and then you can keep the network manager, but I suggest just let's get rid of the network manager so that we're at least safe. Okay, so that's the very first thing that we're going to do. So we're gonna purge this network manager so that we don't have to worry about the network interface flapping. Okay, all right, cool. So at this particular point, we are good with base base installation of Kali. I want to show you something else as well, right? So we know at this particular point, let's look at the resources, right? Let's look at, so we're hovering about 300 megabytes of RAM, right, with the base installation, right? Because there's no GUI or anything of that sort. Now let's start the SSH service, right? So sudo systemctl enable SSH. At the same time, we would want to start the service. Start SSH. Again, it's not there. Wow. I don't know what's going on. Maybe I'm doing this wrong. No. Anyhow, let's look at. Actually, I'm going to install it. So sudo apt-get install SSH. All right, let's see. All right, let's do this. Okay, clear. So sudo apt-get. Let's do systemctl enable SSH. Right now it's enabled. Let's do start the SSH service. Good. Now we're gonna actually check the status. Good. So we're running SSH. It's listening on port 22, and we can go back and do a PuTTY session. Let's do. Okay, here we go. So my IP address is 70.201. Let's go open. Yes, I accept, and this is the show. It's a lot easier. It's a lot better. Okay, all right. Now, let's look at the GUI. Okay, so let's check if the status of xrdp, and oh, it's dead. So let's start this service, actually enable it. So we'll do enable xrdp, and we also gonna start this service, and good. Now we're gonna check the status of xrdp, and perfect. It's running, and it's listening on 3389, right? So let's go ahead and test our RDP session. All right, so connect. have this, enter Kali, and there we go, right? So we have a GUI, remote desktop. You can see it's a base installation, basic tools, basic settings. You don't have any Kali tools here whatsoever, right? These are basic tools, right? Some web links or web hooks, there are icons, but they will take you to the websites and so forth. There are no tools in there, right? But yeah, so let's actually go back to Proxmox to see the utilization, the memory utilization. Look, so at this particular point, your container is has about 620, consuming about 621 megabytes of RAM, right? As compared to your Linux virtual machine, it's 1.28 GB. But you have to consider that this is a full-blown Kali Linux virtual machine. It has all the tools, everything in there, okay? So we're gonna come back to it, we'll revisit it. But for now, let's jump back to Kali Linux and then install Kali Linux tools. Okay, I'm gonna close this and go back to our terminal. Okay. Now, so we've done RDP, installation of RDP and testing of RDP. Let's do a full installation of all the Kali tools, and then we'll do the VNC testing. Okay. So before we do that, I would want to update my system. Just want to make sure that everything is okay and nothing is pending. Where did I miss the sudo? There you go. Yeah, we're good. Okay, so sudo apt install -y. We're gonna start. So before we install anything, I wanna show you the one that I showed you on the website. So we'll do apt cache and we'll say Kali Linux, right? Search. Forgot to search. So here it's the same thing that I've shown you on the website, right? So different meta types or meta packages of Kali Linux, right? So the one that we're going to install is the default one because we have the Kali virtual machine that is running on default. So this is something that we will use in order for us to compare, right? So we'll do sudo apt -y install Kali Linux and default, right? And I think this is going to take at least 10-12 minutes. So I'm going to pause the recording here and come back when it's almost done. Okay, it's done. So just a quick update once again. Just want to make sure everything's okay. And should be fine. And I wanna reboot, but I just want to make sure that there's no network manager installed as well. So just purge network manager. Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna reset this machine. I'm gonna reboot this and as well as the other one. So so we have we clear out the memory. So reboot now. Meanwhile, I'm going to go back to the web page right here, and I'm going to reset this machine as well, so we have a proper comparison. So I'm going to click here and say I want to restart. So we have this virtual machine. And by the way, in virtual machine you have a grub as a loader, but in containers you don't. You get the native hypervisor sort of a BIOS. You don't get like a regular BIOS. So just to let you know, because I've tried to locate those grub configuration files, I couldn't find them. So don't try. All right. So okay, let's look at the resources. 43 megabytes versus 789, but there's no GUI, there's no desktop, so we're gonna fire up a desktop here, but before we do that, right, so we have already tested for RDP. What we're gonna do is we're gonna go back to the terminal and spin off a VNC server, and then try to compare both of them. Okay, so let's go to VNC. So we'll do type VNC server. Let's say geometry. We'll give 1280 times 1024. Or actually, let's leave the geometry. Let's keep the depth to 16, pixel format to RGB 88, RGB 888. Yeah, there you go. So, something's wrong, I think, with the configuration, but you probably need to look at the man pages. Even I'm not an expert for VNC, so. All right, let's fire the VNC client and let's see how it goes. Oh, sorry, not this one. So 20101. Asking for password. And it's not working, since the pixel depth is not okay. So let's kill the session. So VNC server -kill. I'm gonna go back to the console and -kill, and let's do session 1, and let's run this without any parameters. This time it's a session 2, so let's go back to VNC and run in a session 2. Give it a password, and there we are. So now we're in. I mean, if I compare this with the RDP, this is definitely much better, right? So I know there's still a screen tearing and the window tearing and whatnot, but believe me, it's a lot better. I really want you to test this on your own, and if you think otherwise, please do leave it in the comment section below. So, okay, let's look back at our nodes. So, as you can see, right, so the VM, if you look at the console and you go back to the summary, you know that it's consuming about 800 megabytes of RAM, but the container, even with the GUI right now, we have it as a VNC running, it's only 200 megabytes, or close to 300 megabytes. Now, to be fair, let's go to the console and fire up a YouTube session. All right, so we're gonna go here, run a random YouTube video. Michael Jordan. All right, let's go back to the VNC session and fire up YouTube here as well. Mike Tyson. Wow. Okay. All right. Let's go back to the browser and see the results. So you can see the VM, it's consuming about 1.5 gigabytes. But if you look at the container is using only 758 megabytes. It's pretty much half, right? And I think it's amazing, to be honest with you. If you just look at it, right, look at from a performance point of view and the amount of resources that you're going to save, it's absolutely phenomenal, right? So yeah, that's about it from my side. And if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And if you want me to create more content, please let me know in the comment section below, and I'll be happy to do it. All right, you guys have a great day. Cheers.